Canada will welcome 20,000 of the most vulnerable Afghan refugees, and the federal government will speed up its evacuation of Afghans who helped Canada's mission there. Meanwhile, the Taliban captured 5 more provincial capitals in just 24 hours, bringing them ever closer to an offensive on Kabul. Murray Brewster is CBC's senior defense writer. He's in Ottawa. Murray, thank you for joining us today. What have we learned?
Well, Katie, from the news conference that was just held and ended a few moments ago, as you were saying, we've learned that the federal government intends to welcome up to 20,000 Afghan refugees. Now, this is a measure that sort of formalizes what we've been reporting over the last few days, kind of in dribs and drabs about, and it is mostly affecting Afghans who are already outside of out of the country, who have already fled from the Taliban offensive. It includes people who are highly at risk, including minorities and women's leaders, but also 2 journalists. There are several categories that have been opened up here, and Minister Mendicino made clear that this complements the program to get military interpreters and government interpreters out of the country. But there are a number of things that have been left unanswered. Specifically, how do you get these people into the country? How quickly are they going to be resettled here? 20,000 is a big figure. It makes a great headline, but there's not a lot of detail. The other thing where we didn't get a lot of detail in this news conference, and it's very important, is the fate of the Canadian embassy in Kabul. As you know, we reported earlier today that that special forces are standing by to assist in the potential evacuation of the embassy. Minister Garneau, the Foreign Affairs Minister, was asked twice, pointedly, what is the status of the embassy? Because we've been hearing from sources on the ground in Kabul that appointments for people who were trying to get to Canada, biometric appointments, have been canceled. We've been hearing that that the embassy itself has been closed. And this is not from 1, 2, or 3, or 4. This is from multiple sources. So Minister Garneau refused to answer it. Both him and Minister Sajjan, the defense minister, were pleading operational security. Now, it is clear that we are working with our allies, the British and the Americans, as part of a joint effort to get people out. In speaking to sources in the diplomatic community earlier today, essentially what we have been told is that the allies are going to be helping each other out. And if someone shows up who is registered to go to Canada at the international airport in Kabul, then they could potentially be getting on a British flight or an American flight. So it seems that there is a very complex operation underway in Kabul. Minister Mendicino and Minister Sajjan both said in this availability that they are not going to rest until they get everyone out.
Murray Brewster, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Afghanistan is teetering on the brink. The Taliban's blistering offensive has captured 5 more provincial capitals in the past 24 hours. The militant group now controls half of all the capitals in the country. Yesterday, Kandahar and Herat fell, the country's 2nd and 3rd biggest cities. And government forces are battling the Taliban in Logar province, just 80 kilometers from Kabul. Retired Major General Denis Thompson served as commander of Task Force Kandahar in 2008-2009. He is in Trenton, Ontario. Thank you very much for speaking with us today. I'm going to jump right in and ask you, 17 provincial capitals in 1 week, more than 2/3 of the country now under Taliban control. What is going through your head as you watch this happen?
Well, first of all, I think we need to define what control is. I don't believe that removing the government from all these provinces, and they have effectively removed the government, is equal to control. Essentially, what they're doing is creating anarchy because they want to spread that anarchy in order to spread the message that they're coming to take on the whole government. I believe that approach is more a recipe for continued violence, scaled up violence, and potentially civil war.
Continue. Sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say, so while it's not good news, I am aware that the Kandahar airfield is still open for civilian flights to get from Kandahar to Kabul, which is important. The program you were just talking about will take place inside of Kabul. There's no doubt about that. And really, if you want to get people from Afghanistan to a third country and eventually to Canada, they have got to get themselves into Kabul. That's the challenge at the moment.
We just heard breaking news from the federal government. They are announcing a plan to settle 20,000 new Afghan refugees. We're still waiting for a number of the specifics, but, knowing how difficult the situation is on the ground right now, how difficult is it going to be for the Canadian government to try and achieve that?
Well, again, just with the previous plan that was aimed almost exclusively at those Afghan employees who supported the Canadian government operations, whether they were military, diplomatic, or development related, the devil is in the detail. That detail hasn't been shared, as I think was pointed out by Mr. Brewster, for operational security reasons. And it needs to be shared with the whole host of veterans back here in Canada who are assisting on a daily basis these refugees, for want of a better expression, to get to a point where they can access that Canadian government system. And that place is Kabul, and it is extremely difficult, but it's made more difficult by the fact that the flow of communications between well-resourced private citizens here in Canada and the government is lacking, to be blunt.
Can you explain to me how, if you were in charge, I know that a lot of these operations do happen in secret because of operational concerns, but if you were in charge and you were running here, what would you do to make up for the lacking? What strategy would you employ here?
It's not a strategy, it's simple communications. They're the people that provided the names and that are vetting the names for the most part are veterans and of course other folks that were in Afghanistan. It's a simple matter of reaching out to them. They are not an operational security risk. They clearly have this the success of this operation in mind. And so a little bit more transparency to them. I'm not saying share that information with the Canadian public because there are reasons to keep it under wraps, but it needs to be disseminated to people that are in daily and direct contact with a whole host of former Afghan employees and their families. The numbers in Kabul are about 1,000, and the numbers trying to make their way to Kabul are about 1,000. In the previous program, not the one that was just announced. That's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, the U.S. decision to pull its troops out by month's end is getting a lot of the blame for the escalation in violence. But there are other factors at play here. From your perspective and your understanding, we talk so much about the U.S. here and Joe Biden's decision to sort of make this happen on this timeline. But are there other factors at play that we should also be paying attention to as we watch this unfold?
I mean, let's be clear. Policy is set by politicians, not by soldiers. It was Mr. Biden's decision to withdraw from Afghanistan on this accelerated timeline. But we have spent 20 years building an Afghan institution, the Afghan National Security Forces, and we're watching it melt before our eyes, if you will, not in a fashion unlike the way that ISIS took down the Iraqi army in Iraq. Why does that happen? It typically happens because the institutions fail. The individual Afghan soldier is tough as nails. They stand up in a stand-up fight with the Taliban, they'll hang in there. But if there's nothing backing them up, if there's no logistics, no enablers, and enablers by that I mean intelligence, unmanned aerial vehicles, airstrikes, et cetera, to support them, or a medical system, then it's only a matter of time when their morale will crumble, as we are seeing now, and it falls away. So the failureship here is one of institutional leadership within the Afghan National Security Forces. I'm not sure that same house of cards is going to occur around Kabul. I have more confidence that that capital city will hold for some time. I would not want to venture a guess, but I would remind your listeners that at the early part of this, our engagement in Afghanistan, we often refer to the president of Afghanistan as being the mayor of Kabul, because that's all they controlled, and that may well be the end game here.
You said, you used the phrase watching this melt, and there are deep concerns that the situation on the ground may once again transform to turn Afghanistan into a hotbed of instability. That's what we're seeing right now. But given that instability could lead to further chaos and further threats abroad, when Joe Biden announced that U.S. troops were going to be pulling out, he justified that right now Afghanistan is not a place where terror threats that could to face the United States or its allies that that threat doesn't exist anymore. But if this continues as is and we continue to see the volatility and instability, is Afghanistan going to be in the exact same spot it was before the September 11th attacks?
It's a great question, a very complex question, and it goes to the heart of what we try to accomplish in Afghanistan. Were we there to take out al-Qaeda? In other words, because they're the ones with global reach. The Taliban have no interest in anything outside of what you could euphemistically call Pashtunistan. They're not interested in what's going on in New York or Ottawa or the capitals of Europe. The al-Qaeda was the true target. So should we have stopped the mission when the counterterrorism mission succeeded? In other words, dismantling the al-Qaeda network and toppling the government? Or was it the right decision to carry on with nation building, which is what indeed we did? And that, of course, is a policy decision. For all those Canadian soldiers that served in Afghanistan, myself included, we bought these policymakers time to come up with a reasonable solution. If it was frittered away, it certainly wasn't our fault. And this isn't a blame game, but it's merely to say that that's what soldiers do. Professional soldiers buy time for policymakers to arrive at a decision that can be executed on the ground. And there's a whole bunch of aspects to that conflict that you'd have to dive deeper in, and there's certainly not time to do it in a short interview.
Fair enough. And those are the conversations that we need to still have. Retired Major General Denis Thompson, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for keeping this issue in the spotlight, and I hope to see a lot more Afghans come to Canada because they're definitely industrious and productive people.
All right, thank you very much. We will continue to pay very close attention to this issue and the developments as refugees and former contractors come to Canada. Thank you again.
Good evening.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.